So Anthem's VIP demo was a rather interesting experience, and when I say interesting, I mean it was a mixed bag of genuine fun that I had when it worked, coupled with frustration when it didn't. At its best, this version of Anthem we got to play this past weekend was a quite enjoyable but not too innovative action game. Unfortunately, at its worst, it was downright unplayable with constant connection issues, infinite loading screens, and overall a bad performance on a system that greatly exceeds the recommended requirements. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to bring you guys my overall impressions of the Anthem VIP demo, and to give you guys a rundown of how this video is going to be structured, I'm going to split it into parts. The first one is going to be dealing with the positives, while the second one will be dealing with the negatives. I'm also going to try to avoid stating obvious things that have already been discussed beyond the point of saturation, like not being able to log in the game, the infinite loading screens, the rubber banding, and whatever else other technical difficulties there were. I'm going to mostly try to aim towards the design flaws that I find much harder to fix than some temporary technical malfunctions. And yeah, outside of the connection issues I was talking about and expecting anyway to a certain extent, this past weekend has been an overall okay to good experience for me. I was able to go through all of the content several times actually and got as much out of it as anyone could. It also helps that I was able to play this game in the closed alpha, which meant that I was already familiar with many of the game's mechanics and controls, so I just picked things off as they went. One of the pleasant surprises I had was to see that the game graphics look very good on PC, especially on the maximum settings. Yes, there is a noticeable performance drop compared to how it was when I played the closed alpha, but the game overall looks very beautiful, the textures look very detailed to me, and the environment generally felt vibrant. Even after trying out the lower settings, the game still retained an overall good looking aspect. The section of the map we had access to was also rather large, with a lot of verticality to it. There were both underground and underwater passages, as well as flat pieces of land and high altitude areas. It was also interesting to discover some of these hidden places sometimes, as they could hold up pieces of lore, some random events, and sometimes loot chests filled with some very good items. Moving through these environments also felt very good, and I think movement in general is one of Anthem's strongest points, despite some of the problems with the keyboard and mouse controls. Flying in the big open areas in Anthem feels very fun, from the moment you jump from the platform and dive bomb in the water to the time you soar through the skies. It's definitely going to make you feel like a superhero, and even the on-ground movement feels right, and each javelin seems to have different movements and like different weights to it, if I might put it lightly. Speaking of javelins, I was also very impressed with how well they were designed, with many small details and animations being put together to create this beautiful exosuit. Things like the rocket thrusters adjusting when you enter or exit the flight, the legs having a springy feel to them when you put your weight on them while running or sprinting. This immediately brings me to the customization options, which I find to be some of the best I've seen in online games so far. I mean, I was literally able to create 2 Iron Man suits, and this comes from somebody with zero imagination and zero artistic touch. In terms of combat, I think this is another one of Anthem's stronger points, even though it doesn't innovate too much in this area. The combat immediately feels familiar to the one in Mass Effect Andromeda if you played that game, and even the combo system acts pretty much as it did ever since Dragon Age Inquisition, or even more so since Mass Effect 3. This sort of fast action, weapon and ability combination is what I love most about these types of games, and the fact that there's a level of complexity and team coordination with all of these combos is what also makes it a quite great co-op among other things. Speaking of the co-op, the matchmaking system was also spot on. You can immediately group up for literally any other activity in the game, from helping others with doing missions to open world events and even strongholds. There is also a bonus privacy setting for playing alone if that is what you want to, but unfortunately it was disabled during this demo, so I cannot say too much about it. Now, in terms of loot, I found the encounters to be on average very satisfying and rewarding, with a few minor exceptions I'll be talking about in the second section. While it's true that the rewards were bumped up for this demo, generally speaking, Anthem feels rewarding, and it does reward you multiple items per most runs, either by dropping from NPCs themselves or from these nice little chests that are pretty much filled to the brim. It feels very satisfying to also end the expedition and check out the end screen for the XP you made, the achievements you were able to complete, and of course the items you were able to earn or unlock. So I think, at least in these terms, it's going to keep you going for quite some time. Speaking of gear, I'm also going to say that even at this level, the loot diversity leaves room for a huge number of builds you can create. Each javelin, while indeed it has access to most of the weapons, you can oftentimes make them have their own unique playstyles that will greatly be influenced by the type of loot that you get. I know it gets even more wild with masterwork and legendary gear, but even in just the rare category, we can have similar items with different descriptions on them that can end up completely changing the way you create and use your build. For example, you could get two of the same items, one of them favoring damage while the other one reducing cooldowns, so you can potentially create two very similar builds with different playstyles, one with high cooldowns but huge damage, or a faster one but with lower damage. You can also favor raw weapon damage to bring in those crazy numbers, like for example the sniper build I showed you yesterday, or simply go full ability / caster like how it is with the Storm, for example, which pretty much spams his ability. Finally, in this section I'm also going to be talking about the story, and what I've seen so far, both from the available missions and from the trailers, seems quite compelling. The first mission I did in the demo immediately caught my attention, and I did find myself needing to find more about the relic we just found, as well as the forces behind it and the overall story of Anthem. All in all, I believe BioWare does a great job at bringing in compelling and interesting stories, which is not something that you see in most online games. But this is like the general guideline of the good parts I've seen in the demo. I'm sure there could be more added, but for the time being and for the purpose of this video, I'm going to resume at this, as this should be enough. Now, in terms of the bad parts, I'm going to mostly talk about the not so great choices BioWare or EA or both of them decided to go with. First, what's the point of giving us a several months old build to test out if it's so much different compared to the full game? Why would I even bother reporting problems and bugs in such a build, or better yet, make an impression about the full game if it's a completely different or allegedly different compared to the full finished product? I would argue that BioWare is now even wasting too much time trying to repair a build they will not use anyway, and instead of addressing the issues that a full game might have. Also, it was obvious from the very start that this is nowhere near a demo, let alone a VIP one, but rather an alpha or a beta testing at best. This also makes me worried that EA might still pull a bait and switch with Anthem, showing something in the demo that might not be representative for the end product, and like making a complete 180-degree turn for the full game. And this is especially worrying for the customization options and for the microtransactions. Also, in terms of the connection issues, at least in terms of logging in the first few hours, BioWare knew very damn well since the alpha testing last month that people would face this problem, because we had this problem back then as well. The first session of the alpha testing, most people weren't even able to get in at all, so like 90% of the connectivity issues we had the past weekend could have been accounted for quite some time. The next big one is of course the optimization, and with the risk of breaking the NDA, I have absolutely no clue what happened to the game since the alpha stages, but I am seeing a huge performance downgrade and no additional graphical quality. When I played the alpha back last year, I was very impressed with how well the game ran at the maximum settings available. It looked extremely good, I was able to keep a rock solid 70 FPS on my system. Meanwhile, the demo had severe frame drops even when turning down the settings, and I have also noticed some major incompatibilities with the programs that most people might be running in the background, such as for example Shadowplay, OBS, and even when these are not actually recording or turned on. Another big one that is going to be very off-putting to a lot of people is the rather high number of loading screens you'll get on average in the missions. From the expedition screen to the underground passage, there will oftentimes be multiple loading screens. There are even missions which make you run to an underground passage, through a loading screen, check some stuff up, then exit it again through the same loading screen just so you can go a few miles away to collect some stuff and get back to the same underground passage through the same goddamn loading screen. Luckily enough, I was able to run this game on an SSD, so it didn't take me too long to load in the game. It was like a few seconds ordeal, but in long play sessions this can quickly become tiresome. But moving on to some of the gameplay, let's begin with Fort Tarsis, which was supposed to be this different type of player hub. It is, but not in a good way, at least not from what I've seen so far from the demo. It is basically a solo player hub without all of the things that make player hubs great in general, which is like player interaction, players seeing each other, talking, inspecting their gear, and you know, all of that after giving all their quests. After what I've seen so far, I'm glad they added the launch bay in the full game, because I'm not sure I can take much more of this first-person lifeless city. And speaking of lifelessness, while some of the characters, especially the story-related ones, seem very animated and interesting, most of the filler NPCs sitting around the city seem to be a rather slightly updated version of the ones from Mass Effect Andromeda, which is not really a good thing. Now, I will give the benefit of the doubt to BioWare here. I did check other similar games and they don't excel in this category either. It also makes sense for a performance point of view not to have too many complex animations on literally every single character. No matter what, expect the story to look good in terms of facial animations, but the outside characters not so much, and especially the lower they are in ranks and importance, the worse they will be. In terms of the open world, which I praise to look good, and it does, the section of the map we had access to felt quite repetitive and lacking diversity. It's basically a big jungle, and I know that there are other areas left uncovered, but if you look at what we have available in the map, the jungle was already a huge section of it, and the lore does state that the planet we are on is basically a jungle planet. Now, I normally wouldn't be too mad about this, and I definitely won't if the next issue is going to be get fixed, and that is of course the emptiness of the world. In terms of spawns, even the rare creatures are scarce, the random events simply appear or disappear before your eyes, and they don't seem to be that many in the map anyway, and it's like having this huge environment where 99% of it gets unused, while you might end up using like 1% of the area to do some of the combats. So yeah, currently the way it looks is in contrast to how it is, for example, in the gameplay trailer that was revealed 2 years ago, and that one made the world feel quite lively and dynamic. So hopefully this is just something specific to the demo. But since we're still on the subject, I'm also going to quickly address the enemy AI. In many of the instances, I found the AI to be rather dumb, oftentimes getting confused, trying to attack you or run away, and even more so standing still doing nothing and being generally brain dead. Luckily enough, there are bigger bosses out there which are very well scripted, like for example the Ursics, the Titans, or even the Stronghold bosses. These are definitely some very good encounters, and they are very satisfying to adapt to. Finding their weak points and exploiting them definitely feels rewarding as you take them down faster than before. Finally, I'll also quickly go over the UI, and I feel that there's way too much unused space taken by UI elements. This is especially noticeable in the customization menu, where huge chunks of the screen are not even used at all, and the javelins even get covered by it, reducing obviously the visibility and the number one reason why you're even in that section, which is of course to customize your suit and to see how it looks. Most of it gets covered by these UI elements, which are way too damn big, and what I need to do is scale them back a little bit, maybe even reduce those angles. I agree that angled things look pretty interesting, but they need to scale that back, bring it a little bit more to the left, and make it so that the javelin is the primary focus of the customization screen and not the actual UI elements. And there are probably more things I could have said, but I really don't want to make this video like 20 hours long. I think overall it was a mistake for BioWare to bring an old, unfinished, and what's going to be a soon abandoned build to the public and call it a demo, and even more so wasting time trying to patch it out when you have the full game going gold and the one that actually needs fixing if problems exist. So yeah, in conclusion, what I fear is that these problems, which could have been easily avoided, could ruin an otherwise fun experience, but I'm going to leave it at that for now, and I'm going to be seeing you guys later, so peace.